Among all of God's attributes, there is one that reveals itself with a sweetness and strength that surpasses all understanding: mercy. It is not an occasional gesture from God, but the very heart of who He is. God's mercy is not fragile, not hesitant, not negotiable. It is infinite, faithful, scandalously generous. Pope Leo XIV, since the first days of his pontificate, has been a tireless messenger of this truth. He knows that the world, so wounded and exhausted, will not be healed by theories, but by living, welcoming, persevering mercy. In this video, we've gathered 10 moving reflections on God's mercy, according to Pope Leo XIV. Words that don't come just from a speech, but from a life of prayer, listening, and compassion. If you carry burdens, doubts, guilt, or wounds, stay until the end. Mercy is for you. Take the opportunity to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and share this message with those who most need consolation and hope. Let's begin. Reflection 1. God's mercy is greater than our sin. Pope Leo XIV frequently repeats, "No sin is greater than God's mercy." He affirms that, while many carry the image of a God who punishes, condemns, or abandons, the Gospel reveals a Father who runs to meet His child, who embraces before confession, who restores before punishment. He reminds us that sin does have weight, yes, and consequences, but mercy has more strength than any fall. Leo XIV recalls the parable of the prodigal son with depth. It is not the son who convinces the father to accept him back. It is the father who goes out to meet him, and even though he is dirty and broken, covers him with the robe, the ring, and the kisses of forgiveness. This reflection is a call to trust. No matter how far we have gone, no matter how deeply we have fallen, there is always a way back, and that way is called mercy. The Pope warns that one of the greatest obstacles to inner peace is the false belief that we no longer deserve God's love. But he insists God doesn't love us because we are good. He loves us because He is Father. Tufi. This reflection challenges us. Have I closed myself in guilt, or have I allowed God's mercy to lift me? Am I afraid to approach Him because I think I've failed too much? The Pope concludes, guilt paralyzes, mercy liberates, and whoever allows themselves to be forgiven begins anew. Reflection 2. Mercy doesn't deny truth. It transforms it with love. Pope Leo XIV insists that mercy is not complicity, nor indifference in the face of evil. It doesn't pretend sin doesn't exist. It looks sin in the face, but with a gaze that heals instead of condemning. He affirms that one of the great distortions of our time is the idea that mercy is contrary to truth. But the opposite is true. Only mercy allows truth to be lived without crushing. God is truth, yes, but His truth is permeated by compassion. The Pope reminds us that Jesus never ignored the sin of the people He encountered, but He also never humiliated, never exposed, never gave up on anyone. With the Samaritan woman, with the tax collector, with the adulterous woman, with Peter who denied Him, always the same logic: welcome, restore, guide, trust. Leo XIV affirms, truth without mercy wounds, mercy without truth deceives, but when they walk together, they heal. This reflection is an invitation to integrity, to recognize our faults, but without falling into self-destruction, to allow God to speak truth about us and still remain by our side. It provokes us to ask, have I welcomed God's truth with trust? Or do I fear truth because I think it condemns me? Have I lived a faith balanced between firmness and tenderness? The Pope concludes with tenderness, God is not indulgent with sin, but He is infinitely patient with the sinner who desires to be healed. These first two reflections, about the power of mercy in the face of sin and its inseparable union with truth, already show that God's mercy is not a devotional theory. It is the logic of the gospel, the center of the cross, the mark of the resurrection. God does not expect our perfection. He expects our openness. He doesn't demand explanations. He offers new beginnings. Mercy is the most concrete name of love, and only it has the power to heal us completely. As we reflect on these truths, we are invited to take concrete steps, to leave behind the guilt that imprisons, to open ourselves to forgiveness, to allow ourselves to be looked upon by God without fear. Because, as Pope Leo XIV says, God knows the worst in us and still offers the best of himself. God's mercy is not an abstract concept. It is a concrete reality that touches the soul, rescues stories, and transforms lives. Pope Leo XIV leads us, step by step, to immerse ourselves in this mystery with clarity and sweetness. He knows that mercy is not an idea to be understood, but an embrace to be received. After contemplating the greatness of mercy in the face of sin and its inseparable union with truth, we now move on to two equally moving aspects: its infinite patience and its power to begin anew. Reflection 3. God is infinitely patient with those who fall and want to rise. Pope Leo XIV affirms that one of the purest expressions of God's mercy is his patience. He reminds us that God does not work with our clock. He doesn't rush, doesn't become impatient, doesn't tire of us. When we fall, he doesn't reject us, he waits. When we flee, he remains. When we return, he runs to meet us. Leo XIV observes that many souls live tormented by their relapses. They feel shame for confessing the same sins, judge themselves as weak, unworthy, too slow. But the Pope insists, God is not scandalized by our falls. He is moved by our struggle. He cites the saints who also stumbled many times, but who persevered because they trusted more in God's patience than in their own strength. And he invites each believer to welcome mercy with humility, not with fear, to rise with confidence, even if they have fallen 1,000 times. This reflection challenges us. How many times have we failed to seek reconciliation out of shame for having fallen again? How many times have we thought that God has already given up on us, when in truth, he is there, patiently waiting for our return? The Pope concludes, God doesn't count the times we fall, he counts the times we trust and return. Reflection 4. God's mercy is the strength of new beginning. Pope Leo XIV affirms that God's mercy doesn't just forgive, it renews. It doesn't return us to the point where we were. It takes us forward. It is a force that lifts, that cleanses, that sends forth again. He reminds us that God doesn't love us because of a flawless past, but because of a present open to transformation, and that each time we welcome mercy, something new begins, a hope, a courage, a different perspective on ourselves and on others. Leo XIV cites St. Paul, who was a persecutor and became an apostle. He cites St. Mary Magdalene, who wept for her sins and became a witness to the resurrection. For him, mercy is not the end of the story. It is the beginning of a new life. The Pope warns that many live trapped in the past, believing they can no longer do anything good, as if time had run out. But he insists, as long as there is life, there will be a new beginning, because God's mercy never tires of beginning again. This reflection provokes us. Do I believe that God can do something new in me, despite my past? Have I allowed his mercy to give me a new identity, a new mission, a new way of living? The Pope concludes with hope. Mercy is like the morning. It always returns, even after the longest night. These two reflections about God's patience and the power of new beginnings are like balm for the weary soul. How many live blaming themselves, demanding of themselves, punishing themselves, when the Lord is simply saying, return, begin again, I am here. Mercy doesn't deny the past, but it also doesn't imprison us in it. It looks forward to the good we can still do, to the holiness we can still live. Pope Leo XIV reminds us that no one is a lost cause, that mercy is not fragile, it is powerful, and that God's greatest glory is transforming what seemed definitive into a starting point. As we reflect on these words, we are called to trust more, to rise with less guilt and more faith, to let God's patience teach us to have patience with ourselves as well. Because, as the Pope says, mercy doesn't just forgive what we were, it builds what we can become. God's mercy is the thread that sews together the broken parts of our story. It doesn't just cleanse us from the past, but restores us whole to life, capable of loving, serving, and beginning anew. Pope Leo XIV understands this truth not as a devotional concept, but as the real structure of Christian faith. After meditating on divine patience and the power of beginning again, we now move forward with two reflections that speak of reconciliation and meaning, two precious fruits of mercy that when welcomed, restore all that sin tried to destroy. Reflection 5. Mercy is a bridge of reconciliation between brothers and sisters. Pope Leo XIV teaches that God's mercy is not something to be received and kept. It is a gift to be shared. And the most concrete way to manifest that we have been touched by divine mercy is to be merciful to one another. He recalls that reconciliation between brothers and sisters is one of the most urgent signs that the world needs to see in Christians. As long as there is pride, competition, divisions, resentments, there will be no witness of peace. But where mercy is lived, in forgiveness, in dialogue, in listening, in the embrace that begins anew, there the kingdom of God is born. Leo XIV firmly affirms, God's mercy only fully descends upon those who have the courage to extend it to others. He warns that many approach the sacraments, ask for God's forgiveness, but remain with hearts closed to forgiving their brothers and sisters. The Pope recalls Jesus' words in the Gospel, "Go first and be reconciled with your brother," and explains that this is not a moral requirement, but a spiritual condition. The divided heart cannot fully welcome grace. This reflection deeply challenges us. Is there someone I still need to forgive? Are there bonds I've let die because of pride? Have I been an instrument of reconciliation, or have I perpetuated division? The Pope concludes with clarity, mercy reconciles us with God, but it also makes us responsible for our brothers and sisters. Reflection 6. Mercy gives new meaning to pain. Pope Leo XIV does not ignore human suffering. On the contrary, he looks at it with depth and compassion, and affirms, pain, when traversed by mercy, does not destroy, it transforms. He teaches that suffering, lived without faith, can generate revolt, withdrawal, and despair. But suffering welcomed in the light of mercy becomes a place of encounter with God, purification of the heart, and even mission. Leo XIV recalls that the greatest saints of the Church were marked by profound sufferings, illnesses, losses, misunderstanding, but they offered these pains with love, and from them was born fruitfulness. The Pope insists that God's mercy doesn't remove the cross from our life, but it transforms the cross into a bridge. It gives meaning to what seemed useless. It consoles in what seemed unbearable. It illuminates what seemed dark. He invites all who suffer, physically, emotionally, or spiritually, not to hide their pains, but to place them in the merciful hands of the Lord, not with revolt, but with trust, not with haste, but with faith. This reflection touches us in our innermost being. What have I done with my pain? Have I offered it to God, or kept it in heavy silence? Have I allowed mercy to transform my wounds into compassion for others? The Pope concludes, pain traversed with God becomes a place of resurrection. Mercy doesn't eliminate the cross, but it gives us strength to embrace it with hope. These two reflections, reconciliation between brothers and sisters and the new meaning of pain, show that mercy doesn't act only at the level of individual sin. It reaches our relationships. It illuminates our suffering. It heals what the world doesn't know how to heal. Pope Leo XIV teaches us that mercy is more than forgiveness. It is transformation. It is a force that reorders us from within, that returns us to one another, and that makes our falls and crosses a new chance to love. As we reflect on these words, we are invited to open new doors, to forgive, to ask for forgiveness, to offer our pains, to let everything, absolutely everything, be touched by God. Because, as the Pope says, mercy is like the sun. It doesn't choose where to shine. It only needs a heart willing to open the window. Throughout this journey, we have been contemplating God's mercy as a force that heals, forgives, lifts up, transforms. Pope Leo XIV has taught us that this mercy is like a river that never runs dry. It flows, even when we don't see it, even when we ignore it, even when we flee from it. In the previous reflection, we saw how it is a bridge of reconciliation and how it gives new meaning to pain. Now, we delve even more deeply into the heart of this grace, with two fundamental truths, mercy as a school of life and as an answer to inner weariness. Reflection 7. Mercy is a school where the heart learns to love. Pope Leo XIV clearly affirms, mercy is not just a gift to be received. It is a school where the soul learns to love as God loves. He observes that, throughout life, we are wounded by difficult relationships, by experiences of rejection, by traumas, by disappointment. And all of this, without the action of mercy, makes us hard, closed, defensive. But mercy re-educates us inwardly. It teaches us that love is not calculation, that forgiveness is not weakness, that goodness is not naivety. It trains us in love that resists, that insists, that doesn't give up on others or on ourselves. Leo XIV reminds us that it's very easy to be kind to those who love us, but mercy forms us for something higher, to love when it costs, when it's difficult, when we receive nothing in return. He affirms that God's mercy gradually heals the memories of our heart and enables us to live relationships that are freer, truer, deeper. It breaks the cycle of fear, of demand, of judgment, and makes us more like Christ. This reflection invites us to ask, in what areas of my emotional and spiritual life do I still need to be re-educated by mercy? Have I loved with freedom or with defenses? Have I given what I receive or learned to give as God gives, freely? The Pope concludes, the soul that allows itself to be formed by mercy becomes a mirror of God's goodness. Reflection 8. Mercy is the rest of the weary soul. Pope Leo XIV devotes great attention to those who feel spiritually exhausted. He says, many reach a point in life where, even while fulfilling everything that is right, they feel an empty heart. It is inner weariness, the soul that no longer finds meaning, that complies but does not rejoice, that prays but does not listen, that serves but does not feel loved. For him, the answer to this exhaustion is not in doing more, but in resting in God's merciful love. We need to relearn to simply be with the Lord, to let ourselves be loved, to allow ourselves to be welcomed not for what we do, but for who we are. Leo XIV recalls that Jesus did not say, "Come to me, you who are strong," but, "Come to me, all you who are weary, and I will give you rest." This promise is not a spiritual poem. It is a reality, but only those experience it, who stop, who disarm their heart, who enter into prayer, not to conquer, but to rest. He teaches that mercy is like the Father's lap, a place where we can cry without needing to explain ourselves, where we can fall without being rejected, where we can rest without needing to deserve it. This reflection questions us. Have I sought God's presence as a place of rest, or only as a tribunal where I expect to be judged? Have I allowed myself to rest in God, or do I carry even prayer as one more responsibility? The Pope concludes with tenderness. The soul that surrenders to God's merciful love rediscovers the joy of simply existing. These two reflections, about mercy as a school of love and as rest, reveal that it is not just a moment of forgiveness, but an entire way of living. It forms us from within, sustains us from without. It doesn't just erase what has passed. It ignites what we can still become. Pope Leo XIV shows us that mercy is, at the same time, the principle and sustenance of spiritual life. With it, we learn to love. With it, we learn to rest. And gradually, we become more human, more docile, more like Christ. As we reflect on these words, we are called to let mercy teach us. Let it remake us. Let it embrace us on good days and on days when everything seems dark. Because, as the Pope says, there is no weariness that mercy cannot alleviate, and there is no hardness of heart that it cannot patiently soften. God's mercy is the final word about humanity. No fall, no error, no dark night has the power to silence this love that insists, rescues, and rebuilds. Pope Leo XIV, with his life of prayer and listening, has proclaimed with clarity, if the Church is not a house of mercy, it will be just one more structure among many. After all we have seen, divine patience, new beginnings, reconciliation, the soul's rest, we now move to the final two reflections, where the Pope invites us to become, ourselves, instruments of mercy in the world. Reflection 9. Mercy makes us resemble God. Pope Leo XIV teaches that there is no more profound way of imitating God than being merciful. He affirms compassion is not just a virtue, it is the most luminous reflection of God's heart in a human heart. He observes that, in Scripture, God does not reveal himself first as judge, but as Father, as the one who hears the cry of the poor, who bends over the wounded, who forgives the unfaithful, who lifts up the fallen, and that when we imitate this movement, when we prefer to forgive rather than punish, to welcome rather than exclude, to wait rather than rush, we become, in some way, similar to the Father. Leo XIV insists that mercy is not a sign of weakness, but of spiritual maturity. It is much easier to react with harshness, to judge quickly, to close the heart. But mercy requires depth. It requires listening. It requires prayer. He invites all the faithful to become a merciful presence in the environments where they live, in the family, at work, in the church, in coexistence with those who are different. This reflection provokes us. Has my life reflected the face of a merciful God? Or have I been an instrument of rigidity, demand, judgment? Have I chosen, in my relationships, the easier path or the path of patient love? The Pope concludes, "The soul that has learned to be merciful has begun to resemble God." Reflection 10. Mercy is the legacy we should leave in the world. Pope Leo XIV ends his catechesis on mercy with a call to make it a mission. He affirms, "More than words, what the world needs to see is people who love as Jesus loved." He observes that many people may never enter a church, may never hear a sermon, may never read the gospel, but they can experience God's mercy through one of our gestures. Leo XIV affirms that Christian life will not be measured only by prayer or by promises made, but by love concretely lived, and that, at the end of our existence, the only thing we will really leave behind will be the mark of how much we loved. He invites each person to think, if my life ended today, what kind of spiritual legacy would I leave? Was I someone who carried grudges or who opened doors? Was I a presence that judges or a presence that heals? This final reflection is not just a consolation. It is a call to make mercy a lifestyle, to not just receive it, but offer it, to let our words, our gestures, our decisions become seeds of reconciliation in the world. The Pope concludes with firmness, "The greatest legacy of a Christian is the good they have made flourish in the hearts of others." These last two reflections, mercy as a reflection of God and as a mission in the world, conclude this journey as a sending forth. Mercy is not a point of arrival, but a point of departure. It finds us so that we can carry it forward. It transforms us so that we can transform. Pope Leo XIV reminds us that mercy is not theory, nor sentimentality. It is the most concrete path of the gospel, the most visible trait of Christ's heart, and the most real hope for a sick world. At the end of this journey, we are invited to keep in our hearts all that we have heard and lived in these reflections. That mercy is greater than sin, that it transforms without omitting truth, that it begins anew without tiring, that it reconciles us with our brothers and sisters, that it gives meaning to pain, that it forms us from within, that it gives rest to the soul, that it makes us resemble God, and that it is the most precious legacy we can leave. Because, as Pope Leo XIV says, when everything passes, positions, titles, works, plans, only love will remain, and mercy is the most faithful name of love. May we today ask for the grace to be healed, sustained, and sent forth by mercy, and may it accompany us to the end.